Sunak.
Mr. Speaker, thank you, and I beg to move that the non-domestic rating nursery grounds bill be now read a second time. Agriculture is at the heart of our country's rural life, and moreover, it is at the core of our rural economy. It employs over 500,000 people and supplies almost half of everything we eat and drink in this country. In England alone, the rural economy is worth over £250 billion. And we want our country to offer unparalleled business opportunities for an agricultural community that produces some of the finest food and drink in the world. At every stage of the food chain, the UK is creating exceptional food and drink enjoyed around the world with lucrative opportunities for British exporters, international buyers and investors. In just 10 years, global demand has grown by nearly a third, with total food and drink exports now exceeding £20 billion. I am proud to represent a deeply rural and agricultural constituency, home to businesses like Wensleydale Creamery, Heck Sausages, Stamford Farm Yogurts and Thornborough Cider. All fantastic rural businesses producing food and drink that competes with the best around the world. And Madam Deputy Speaker, this government is absolutely committed to supporting sustainable growth in the rural economy. Through the 2014-20 Rural Development Programme, we are investing almost £500 million in England's rural businesses. Our support for rural enterprises includes developing farm and horticultural companies. In February, the government launched a wide-ranging consultation on the future of farming, one that supports farmers once the United Kingdom is outside the European Union. The government is now analysing views and responses from all stakeholders who contributed. And our ambition is for a more dynamic and self-reliant agricultural industry. Supporting our rural economy and protecting farmers is an essential part of our exit from the European Union. Leaving the EU provides the government with a unique opportunity to establish new frameworks that support our farmers to grow more, sell more and export more great British food and drink. And as we develop this new approach to food, farming and fisheries outside the EU, we will not compromise on our high standards of animal welfare and environmental protection. The government is also set to continue to commit the same cash total, £3 billion, in funds for farm support until the end of this Parliament. And then the government will devise a new agri-environment system to be introduced in the following Parliament. Happy to give way.
I thank the honourable gentleman for giving way, but one of the big problems I'm sure he knows when we talk about protecting farmers is actually getting labour in from the EU or other parts of the world. That's where the big problem might lie after we've come out of the EU.
Well, I thank the honourable member for the intervention. He'll know that it's not quite my place to comment on future immigration policy, but he will know that the new Home Secretary is, of course, devising a new immigration system for the UK after Brexit, and, of course, ensuring that all businesses, not just agriculture, have access to the talent and the labour they need will be at the forefront of that new system. The government has also said that it will use the structural fund money that comes back to the UK following the EU exit to create a UK shared prosperity fund. The needs and interests of rural businesses have to be addressed as part of any future plans. And Madam Deputy Speaker, we firmly believe the business rate system plays an important role in supporting agricultural productivity. The agricultural exemption from business rates is a key part of this support. It is a broad-ranging and generous tax measure which ensures no business rates are paid on agricultural land and properties. Happy to give way.
I'm grateful to him for giving way. The bill itself does not define what a nursery ground is, but the explanatory notes, which are not considered by Parliament and which are not part of the legislation, does contain a definition of what a nursery ground is. Why is this? Would it not be better to put the definition in the bill? Or is my honourable friend going to tell us that the definition does exist in other legislation?
I thank my honourable friend for the intervention, and he's right. I think my understanding is that legislation elsewhere has outlined the difference between the two, and indeed the court decision that I'll come on to, which distinguished between the treatment. For members' benefit, for those who are not aware of the distinction, perhaps it's helpful to point out the distinction now. A nursery ground is where small plants or trees are propagated or sown with a view to selling them on to someone else for growing onto their mature state, for sale to or use by the end consumer, whereas a market garden is where fruit, vegetables, flowers or plants are produced to be sold directly or indirectly to members of the public for consumption.
Would the Minister kindly...
I'm happy to give.
On that very note, I, Madam Deputy Speaker, have been much involved with the horticultural industry, so I am quite aware of this industry, but I do believe many people are not aware of how significant this nursery industry actually is, and A, growing produce for our home market, but B, we could grow it even more with Brexit, indeed we need to, and this bill will indeed help a great deal by making the business more viable.
Well, my honourable friend, Taunton, as ever, is an incredible champion for agricultural and the rural community, and she is absolutely right to highlight not only the current contribution of the fantastic horticultural sector to the UK economy in providing such fantastic food and drink for us to enjoy, but also to highlight the opportunities that will come especially after Brexit as we make good on the promise of a global Britain where our food and drink exporters can look out to the world around where demand is growing exponentially and take advantage of all those opportunities. And indeed, consumers around the world will have the opportunity to benefit from high-quality produce developed in this country and always produced to high welfare standards, which I know she is also a champion of. To turn back to the exemption from business rates for agricultural land, it's worth noting that this has been in place since 1929. And before that, in the early part of the 20th century, and earlier, agricultural benefited from a partial exemption from rates. So for almost 100 years, the government and Parliament have considered that agriculture should not pay rates. This government and I trust this Parliament has no intention of any change of direction in this matter. And it has been assumed, up till now, that all plant nurseries where plants or trees are grown in the initial stages of their life, as I outlined, benefited from this particular exemption. And that had always been the understanding of both rating valuers and practitioners. But in 2015, a Court of Appeal decision showed the exemption did not apply to plant nurseries in buildings where the buildings were not used in connection directly with agricultural land. Now, this does not reflect government policy, and neither does it reflect our commitment to supporting sustainable growth in the rural economy. So this legislation will ensure plant nurseries in buildings will once again benefit from the exemption from business rates for agricultural land and buildings. It restores fairness for hard-working businesses hit by an unexpected tax burden, and it will enable the Valuation Office Agency to return to its former practice of exempting plant nurseries in buildings and removing those plant nurseries which have been assessed from the business rates list. For those plant nurseries paying business rates since 2015, they will be eligible to apply for a backdated refund of their business rates. And this will ensure these businesses do not continue to suffer as the result of a property tax with an impact on the cost of farming and produce. Happy to give way.
I thank my honourable friend, and he's clearly laying out the position as the government has foreseen. Could he clarify one issue which has been raised with me, which is the position of garden centres, which of course are commercial centres for the provision direct to the public, compared to those that are hybrids, i.e. plant nurseries that have a garden centre alongside them that sell their produce directly to the public? What will their position be under the new legislation?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for bringing up a very helpful and important point that it's worth clarifying. Garden centres under current business rates legislation are not exempt from paying business rates. They are not treated as agricultural businesses, which I'm sure honourable members will understand. However, in the particular case that he mentioned, it will of course be for the Valuation Office Agency to determine the individual facts, but in general it is perfectly possible for different parts of an entity to be treated in different ways. So in the example he gave of a hybrid between an agricultural business which also had a retail operation, the Valuation Office Agency would be able to treat different parts of the business in different ways, and some may benefit from the agricultural exemption. Another example might be a working farm that also happens to have a retail element to it, for example, a farm shop, which might not benefit from the agricultural exemption, whereas the rest of the farm would. I hope that clarifies for the honourable member his query. Madam Deputy Speaker, in developing this legislation, we have worked very closely with the National Farmers Union to ensure that this measure meets our shared aim, ensuring that plant nurseries benefit from the agricultural exemption. And I wanted to put on record my thanks to the NFU for their invaluable insights and expertise, which has helped us bring this effective legislation to the House. I very much welcome their support for this bill. And I'd also, Madam Deputy Speaker, like to put on the record my thanks to my honourable friend, the member for St Austell and Newquay, who deserves enormous credit for highlighting this issue for both my predecessor and others last year, and has continued to press the case with ministers and with other parts of government, and I'm glad that he will be able to see today the fruits of his labour brought to bear. To turn to my honourable friend's comment from Harrow, this bill will not otherwise disturb the existing boundary of the agricultural exemption. So uses beyond agricultural operations, such as garden centres, will continue to be subject to the normal business rates process. Happy to give way.
I'm grateful to him for giving way. Is in effect then what he's saying is that all this bill does is return the law to the same state as we all thought it was before the case of Tunnel Tech against Reeves?
My honourable friend is absolutely right. That is exactly what this bill seeks to do. It is a limited, targeted bill that restores practice that previously was widely accepted and understood by all participants in the rating system, and will ensure that we return to the system that existed before the Court of Appeal decision. And just while I'm responding to my honourable friend, to just make sure I clarified an earlier point I made, he asked about where exactly the definition of nursery grounds arises. I am reminded that it is precisely defined in case law rather than in statute. And that is where the definitions that have been used over the years have been developed. Now, to turn to the business rate system in general, Madam Deputy Speaker, the government is very clearly using the business rate system to create opportunities and to drive growth across the country. The government has introduced a range of business rates reforms that are worth over £10 billion by 2023, which will benefit the wider economy, including many businesses in rural areas. In April of last year, we permanently doubled small business rate relief to 100% and raised the threshold from £6,000 to £12,000. As a result of these measures, over 600,000 small businesses, occupiers of a third of all properties, now pay no business rates at all. This demonstrates the government's clear commitment to supporting small businesses. And we understand the impact of business rates in the rural economy in particular. So at that time, the government also doubled rural rate relief from 50 to 100% for eligible businesses. And furthermore, the government continues... I'd be happy to give way.
On that note, now, I speak from a very... I have an urban area in my constituency, but Taunton Deane, Madam Deputy Speaker, is also particularly rural. And there is a view that there's an increasing divide between urban and rural, particularly in the southwest where we are largely rural. And these business rate exemptions are absolutely crucial. Would the Minister agree that this is the government that is very much indicating we understand the importance of this?
My honourable friend is absolutely right, and she will know that I also represent a deeply rural constituency, so I see firsthand the incredible difference that these business rates exemptions make to small rural enterprises, whether it's small business rate relief or rural rate relief, or indeed some of the measures to support pubs that the Chancellor recently announced in the last budget or two. All of these measures add up to tangible savings for thriving enterprises, which are indeed the lifeblood of rural areas. And she will know, as I do, that in rural areas typically we do not benefit from large multinational employers. The backbone of rural economies are small and medium-sized enterprises, for whom business rates are often a significant cost to bear, and any relief that the government can give is always warmly welcomed and makes an enormous difference to their profitability and future success. And I'm pleased to tell my honourable friend that the government continues to listen to business. At the spring budget last year, the Chancellor announced a £435 million package to support ratepayers facing the steepest rises in bills following the revaluation. And further answering calls from businesses, the government brought forward to April of this year the switch in the annual indexation of business rates from RPI to CPI. This represents a cut in business rates every year. And bringing forward this measure 2 years earlier than previously planned, although it might sound technical, is worth £2.3 billion over the next 5 years. Furthermore, at the autumn budget of last year, the Chancellor also announced an increase in the frequency of property revaluations from every 5 years to every 3 years following the next revaluation. And this will ensure that bills more accurately reflect property's current rental value and relative changes in rents. The 2018 Spring Statement announced that the next revaluation will be brought forward to 2021 from 2022, so businesses can benefit from this change as soon as possible. And after this, 3-year revaluations will take effect in 2024. Now, to deliver upon this commitment, the government has already introduced secondary legislation to set the valuation date for the next revaluation on the 1st of April of 2019, allowing the VOA to start preparing for a 2021 revaluation. The government will bring forward primary legislation to change the date of the next revaluation to 2021 in due course. The British Retail Consortium recognised that it was a positive move to improve the fairness of the system, and I look forward to meeting them shortly. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, in spite of all of this, the government is not resting on its laurels. We are also reviewing the wider taxation of the digital economy, and the Chancellor has been clear that we need to look more broadly at the overall taxation of the digital economy. And the government is working internationally to ensure corporate tax rules deliver fairer results for certain digital businesses. And we will use the output of these discussions to help inform consideration of the wider business tax system to ensure that all businesses make a fair contribution to the public finances and business rates continue to support the stability of local government funding. Happy to give way.
I'm grateful to him for giving way. He's being very generous in giving way. But can he tell the House what is the position with regard to a business that has been adversely affected by this Court of Appeal decision? Will they be able to claim compensation for any losses they suffered?
I'm happy to tell my honourable friend that businesses will absolutely be able to claim back any business rates that they have paid dated back to 2015 or the 1st of April 2015. In Wales, they will be able to claim back to the 1st of April of 2017. And perhaps it's helpful for members if I explain the difference in those two dates. And that's simply because the business rate system in England has relative lists of valuation dates. So there's a 2010 list and a 2017 list. When you reach a certain point, it's then impossible to go back and change the list from the beginning. And in this case, for any decisions that the Valuation Office Agency made after spring of 2016, it was only possible to go back and change people's bills to April of 2015. Our understanding is that there are only a handful of businesses that have been caught up by this, and they will therefore be able to use this legislation and subsequent regulations to appeal to the Valuation Office Agency and receive a refund backdated to when they first started paying bills.
I'm grateful to him for giving way, but could he just clarify something? And if he can't answer today, could he write to me? In addition to claiming back what has already been paid, will these businesses that have been affected be able to claim costs and any other expenses arising out of the money that they erroneously had to pay?
Well, I tell my honourable friend they will not be able to claim costs, so to speak. The new system of challenge appeal allows them to make a no-cost filing with the Valuation Office Agency, so there won't be any cost to them in claiming back the bills that they paid. But it is important to note that at the time they paid the bills, they were not paid in error. They reflected the circumstances on the ground at the time. And it's just helpful to clarify further why, as I said I would do, why the date in Wales is different to the date in England, and that is purely on advice from the Welsh government and wealth officials that they do not believe any businesses have been caught up by this in a way that would impact their previous list. So for the situation in Wales is any active businesses caught up in this will only have their bills backdated to 2017 at the start of the new and current ratings list, and therefore they do not require a more further retrospective dating of the legislation. To return to the digital economy, I'm happy to give way. Yeah.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way, and clearly he's setting out to answer many of the questions across the House. Could he clarify the position of the number of businesses that have been caught up in this, and equally what the total amount of money is involved? And if he's not able to answer that today, I can quite understand, but I think it would be helpful to many of our colleagues if that could be clarified subsequently in writing.
I'm happy to tell my honourable friend that I can clarify the answer to his question now, and what I can tell him is that the government does not actually know and is not in a position to know the individual tax or business rate circumstances of various individual businesses across the country. The Valuation Office Agency is under no obligation to share that confidential taxpayer information with the department, and what I can tell him, though, is based on conversations informally with the sector, with the VOA, we believe that the number of businesses impacted by the court ruling who have subsequently had their bills changed numbers just a handful. So that is the working number that we are aware of, and I hope that provides him with the clarity that he requires. To return to digital taxation, Madam Deputy Speaker, just to finish on that, say that the paper published at the autumn budget of 2017 sets clear expectations on what the government hopes to achieve on digital taxation. International momentum behind long-term corporate tax reforms, and pending that, the development of interim multilateral digital tax measures. So, in conclusion, Madam Deputy Speaker, this bill delivers on our commitment to support the rural economy and promote this country's rural life. And moreover, it promotes fairness for hard-working businesses in the agricultural sector. I believe it has widespread support from the agricultural community and valuers around the country, and I very much commend it to this House.